I had survived asteroid mining accidents, customs inspections on 6 different planets, and raising a 7-year-old daughter entirely on my own. I thought that qualified me to handle almost anything the galaxy could throw at me. I was wrong. The real challenge was sitting across a dinner table from my future mother-in-law. My daughter was excited the entire ride to the engagement dinner. She wore a sparkly blue dress she had picked herself and spent 20 minutes practicing how to say, "Thank you," in my fiancé's native alien language. Every few minutes she would ask if she looked okay. "You look amazing," I told her for the 10th time. She grinned. "Do you think Grandma will like me tonight?" The question hit harder than she realized. "I think anyone would be lucky to have you in their family." My fiancé squeezed my hand from the driver's seat and smiled at my daughter through the mirror. "That includes me," she said warmly. My daughter beamed. That was one of the reasons I loved her so much. She had never treated my little girl as baggage. From the day we met, she treated her like family. Unfortunately, her mother had different opinions. The dinner was being held at an enormous estate overlooking the glowing oceans of a resort moon. Crystal lights floated above the garden, expensive musicians played soft music, and enough food covered the tables to feed a small colony. My future mother-in-law greeted us with the enthusiasm of someone welcoming a tax audit. She hugged her daughter. She shook my hand. Then she glanced at my little girl. "Oh, she's here too." Not exactly the warm family welcome I'd hoped for. As the evening continued, things only got worse. Every conversation somehow excluded my daughter. Family photos were organized without her. Discussions about the future carefully ignored her existence. Each comment was subtle enough to deny but obvious enough to hurt. My daughter tried her best to stay cheerful. She complimented decorations. She thanked servers. She laughed at jokes. Meanwhile, I watched her confidence slowly shrink. My fiancé noticed it too. I could see the frustration growing behind her smile. Finally, everyone gathered around the massive dining table for the formal engagement dinner. Glasses were raised. Toasts began. Family members congratulated us. For a moment, I thought maybe the worst was over. Then my daughter reached for a bread basket. My future mother-in-law suddenly looked directly at her. The entire table quieted. She smiled a cold smile and said, "Sweetheart, this dinner is really for our kids, not extras." Silence. Absolute silence. The musicians actually stopped playing. My daughter froze. Her small hands slowly retreated from the basket. The smile vanished from her face. I felt my blood pressure launch into orbit. Several relatives stared at their plates. Others looked horrified. My fiancée immediately pushed back her chair. "Excuse me?" she said. The room somehow became even quieter. Her mother shrugged. "I'm simply saying this is a family celebration." My daughter lowered her eyes. That hurt more than the insult itself. Before I could respond, my fiancé spoke again. "No. She's family." Her voice was calm, but everyone at the table could hear the anger underneath. "She's going to be my daughter." For the first time all evening, her mother looked uncomfortable. The tension spread across the room. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew where to look. Then, from the far end of the table, a quiet chuckle broke the silence. An elderly grandmother sat watching everything unfold. Unlike everyone else, she looked amused. Not shocked. Not embarrassed. Amused. She slowly sipped her drink while studying the faces around the table. When her eyes landed on my daughter, her expression softened. Then she smiled. It wasn't the smile of someone witnessing a disaster. It was the smile of someone who already knew how this story was going to end. And somehow, that smile made me feel a whole lot better. 3 days after the engagement dinner disaster, I was enjoying a peaceful afternoon at home when my communicator started exploding with messages. Not one message. Not 10 messages. Dozens. Some came from relatives I barely knew. Some came from people who had never contacted me before. One was from a cousin who had forgotten my birthday 6 years in a row. Every message contained some variation of the same question. Have you heard the news? No idea what you're talking about, I replied. Within minutes my fiancé arrived carrying a tablet, and a look that suggested something very entertaining was happening. You need to see this. I looked down at the screen. An official inheritance hearing had been scheduled. Apparently the elderly grandmother who had watched the engagement dinner had passed away peacefully 2 days earlier. The entire family had been summoned to hear the contents of her final estate arrangements. Nobody thought much of it. The woman had been wealthy, but everyone assumed her assets would be divided among adult relatives. My future mother-in-law seemed especially confident. When we arrived at the attorney's office, she was already discussing potential renovations she wanted to make to the family vacation cabin on Azure Moon. That cabin was legendary. Beautiful beaches, luxury accommodations, private docks, tourism value through the roof. Everybody wanted it. Everybody expected a piece of it. The attorney finally entered the room carrying a stack of documents. The reading began. Several accounts were distributed. Investments were divided. Family heirlooms were assigned. Everything seemed normal. Then the attorney adjusted his glasses. I will now address ownership of the Azure Moon vacation property. Every head in the room snapped up. The attorney continued. Per the wishes of the deceased, full ownership of the property is awarded to... He paused. Everyone leaned forward. The youngest member of the family. Confused expressions spread around the room. Then he said my daughter's name. Silence. Absolute silence. My future mother-in-law looked like someone had unplugged her brain. What? She blurted. The attorney calmly continued reading. Not only had my daughter inherited the cabin, but recent commercial developments nearby had increased its value dramatically. The property was now worth several million interstellar credits. A fork literally fell from someone's hand. One uncle nearly inhaled his drink. My daughter looked around the room. Do I own a beach house? Apparently, I said. She smiled. Can I build a giant sand castle there? The attorney laughed. Legally speaking, yes. The room exploded into chaos. Relatives began talking over each other. Questions flew everywhere. Meanwhile, my future mother-in-law sat frozen in her chair, probably replaying the moment she called the property's owner an extra in front of everyone. Then something amazing happened. The family underwent the fastest personality transformation in recorded history. An aunt suddenly appeared beside my daughter with a gift bag. A cousin offered to teach her how to swim. An uncle volunteered to take her on sightseeing trips. Another relative claimed he had always considered her family. Always. My daughter stared at him. What's your name again? Half the room started laughing. The man quietly sat down. Things only became more ridiculous. People who had ignored her for months suddenly wanted photos together. Family members complimented her drawings. One aunt offered to bake cookies every weekend. Another promised birthday presents until she turned 30. My fiancé sat beside me struggling not to laugh. Do you think they realize how obvious this looks? Not even a little. Then came the moment nobody expected. My future mother-in-law stood up and cleared her throat. Everyone turned toward her. With a smile so fake it deserved its own award, she announced, I've always considered her part of the family. The room became completely silent. For about 2 seconds. Then multiple relatives burst into laughter. Even the attorney had to look away. My daughter blinked innocently. Then why did you call me an extra? The laughter got even louder. My future mother-in-law's face turned 3 different shades of purple. And for the first time since that terrible dinner, I realized karma wasn't just coming. It had already arrived. The following month felt less like a family gathering and more like a competitive reality show called Win the Affection of the 7-Year-Old Millionaire. Every single relative suddenly became an expert on children. One uncle showed up with a robotic alien pony that could sing, dance, and somehow make pancakes. My daughter played with it for 5 minutes before asking, Why didn't you get me a birthday present last year? The man nearly dropped the pony. Another relative organized what he called a best niece celebration day. There were balloons. There was cake. There were matching t-shirts. The problem was that my daughter wasn't actually his niece. When she pointed that out in front of everyone, the event ended much faster than planned. Meanwhile, cousins who had barely spoken to her before were suddenly inviting her everywhere. One wanted to teach her space surfing. Another wanted to help her build sandcastles. A third declared her his favorite family member despite not knowing her middle name. Watching grown adults compete for the approval of a second grader became my favorite form of entertainment. My fiancé enjoyed it just as much. Every evening we'd sit together on the couch reviewing the day's nonsense like sports commentators. Your uncle bought her 3 hoverbikes today. Mom sent 6 gift baskets. Your cousin offered to name his future child after her. We would laugh until tears formed in our eyes. Those quiet evenings became my favorite part of the chaos. While the rest of the family chased an inheritance, she focused on us. On movie nights. On helping with homework. On teaching my daughter words from her homeworld. The more I watched them together, the more certain I became that I was marrying the right person. One night my daughter climbed into her lap while we watched a movie. Will you still be my mom after the wedding? My fiancé immediately hugged her. I already am. For a moment, all the inheritance drama disappeared. That simple answer meant more than any vacation cabin ever could. Unfortunately, the family's greed wasn't finished providing entertainment. Arguments began breaking out everywhere. People openly discussed future profits from the property. Some relatives debated expansion plans. Others discussed tourism opportunities. One particularly ambitious cousin had already designed a luxury resort brochure for a cabin he didn't own. The situation became so ridiculous that another family meeting was scheduled. Everyone gathered once again at the attorney's office. I expected more arguments. I was not disappointed. The room sounded like a stock market during a meteor strike. People debated percentages, investment opportunities, partnership arrangements, dream businesses. The attorney patiently waited until everyone exhausted themselves. Then he opened another document. The room became quiet. There is one additional condition attached to the inheritance. Instant silence. Every relative leaned forward. The attorney adjusted his glasses. The property cannot be sold, leased, transferred, developed, or used for commercial purposes until the owner reaches adulthood. Nobody spoke. For several seconds, the room seemed frozen in time. Then calculations began appearing on faces. My daughter was 7. That meant years and years of waiting. The dreams of quick profits evaporated instantly. One cousin slowly lowered his luxury resort brochure. Another relative deleted business plans from his tablet. An aunt quietly removed a spreadsheet from her screen. The collapse happened so quickly it was beautiful. Then my daughter raised her hand. The attorney smiled. Yes? Does that mean I still get to build giant sandcastles? Absolutely. She cheered. Meanwhile, several adults looked like they had just suffered emotional damage. The best part came when I glanced toward my future mother-in-law. The woman who had called my daughter an extra now realized she couldn't gain a single credit from the cabin for many years. All those gifts. All those compliments. All those desperate attempts to rewrite history. Completely useless. For the first time since this entire mess began, she looked genuinely defeated. And somehow I had a feeling the funniest part of the story was still ahead of us. Wedding preparations took over our lives during the following weeks. Compared to the inheritance drama, planning an interstellar wedding actually felt relaxing. My daughter threw herself into the process with unlimited enthusiasm. She helped choose decorations, sampled desserts, and took her role as flower girl so seriously that she created a 30-page notebook titled, "Important Wedding Business." Most of it was drawings of cake. My fiancé loved every second of it. The two of them spent hours together laughing, planning, and occasionally arguing about whether chocolate fountains counted as essential wedding equipment. Watching them together reminded me why none of the inheritance nonsense truly mattered. The cabin was nice. The money was nice. But family was what mattered. Real family. Not the kind that suddenly appeared when property values increased. As the wedding approached, something unexpected happened. My future mother-in-law began trying to repair the damage she had caused. The attempts were awkward. Painfully awkward. She brought gifts. She offered compliments. She tried starting conversations. My daughter remained polite, but children have remarkable memories. Especially when adults underestimate them. The biggest test came during the rehearsal dinner. Nearly the entire extended family attended. The atmosphere felt very different from the engagement dinner months earlier. This time nobody ignored my daughter. In fact, they couldn't stop praising her. One relative complimented her intelligence. Another praised her kindness. A third called her the heart of the family. I nearly laughed into my drink. The same people who once treated her like an outsider now acted as though she'd personally saved the galaxy. Then my daughter stood up. She tapped her glass with a spoon. The room grew quiet. I expected a cute little speech. Instead, Karma decided to make one final appearance. She smiled innocently. I just wanted to say thank you. Everyone smiled back. She continued. Thank you for being so nice to me after everyone found out I owned the cabin. Silence. Complete silence. You could practically hear panic spreading around the room. My daughter wasn't finished. Before that, most people didn't talk to me very much. Several relatives suddenly became fascinated by their food. But after the inheritance, everyone started buying me presents. A cousin looked ready to crawl under the table. And now everybody says I'm their favorite. My fiancé buried her face in her hands, trying not to laugh. I wasn't doing much better. The room had become a museum of guilty expressions. Then my daughter delivered the final blow completely by accident. I guess owning property makes people friendlier. Nobody knew where to look. A few guests failed to hold back their laughter. Others choked on drinks. One uncle stared at the ceiling as if praying for rescue. Meanwhile, my future mother-in-law looked absolutely mortified. For once, nobody could blame the child. She had simply told the truth. The entire truth. Eventually my fiancé stood and wrapped an arm around my daughter. Then she looked directly at her mother. For the record, she said calmly, family isn't determined by blood, money, or inheritance. The room listened carefully. It's determined by who shows up, who loves you, and who stays when there's nothing to gain. Nobody argued. Nobody could. Because everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. My daughter threw her arms around her. My fiancé hugged her back immediately. That single moment meant more than every gift, every apology, and every inheritance discussion combined. The next day we got married. The ceremony was beautiful. The flower girl nearly stole the entire show. I married the woman who had loved my daughter from the very beginning. And my daughter gained the mother she deserved. As for the cabin, it remained safely in her name, waiting for whatever future she chose. A few weeks later we hosted a small family gathering. My daughter looked around the room and asked an innocent question. Now that nobody can inherit my cabin for years, are you all still going to visit me there someday? The reaction was priceless. Several relatives suddenly remembered appointments. Others discovered urgent scheduling conflicts. One cousin actually checked a calendar that wasn't even turned on. Within minutes half the room had excuses. My daughter watched them leave. Then she looked at me. Then at her new mother. Then she shrugged. I guess they're really busy. My wife and I burst out laughing. Because in the end, the elderly grandmother had been right. The people chasing money eventually revealed themselves. The people offering genuine love stayed. And for a human father, an alien wife, and a little girl who only wanted a family, that turned out to be worth far more than any cabin on any moon in the galaxy.